Hello, and welcome to Ingrained Living, where healing begins with listening. I'm Bethany Thomson, your hostess. I'm an integrative and functional dietitian, Christian soul care practitioner, and holistic life design coach. And I'm so glad you're here with me today for some tea. This is just a cozy space for us to talk. And today, for our tea time, I'm going to walk you through what I wish every woman knew. And that's how to truly look at your labs and understand what they mean. So, I have a guide that you can download if you would like, and I'll link that in the show notes wherever you're listening, so that if you are on video, you can watch along with us. And if you're listening in your car or taking a walk on audio, you can download that and have it as a reference for later. But I want you to know that you're welcome here. And this space today is just for us to talk because so many women come to me feeling foggy and anxious and exhausted, and they know something's off, but they've been told that it's just stress or it's just all in their heads. And a lot of times they'll hear the words, "Your labs are fine." So they think there's nothing wrong with me, but I know something is. So this is just time for us to talk about that. And if you were sitting at my table, here's when I would pour you a cup of tea and say, "Have a seat. Let's just talk." And if you brought your labs with you, just let's spread them out on the table, and we're going to take a look at it. And I want to walk you through things so that you understand what you have, even if it's something you got back from your doctor. You feel like you've had a slew of labs, you just don't know what they mean, and we're going to look at those and see if we can start to get some clues just by listening to basic blood labs. Now I use a lot of different wonderful tools in my practice to help us dig a little bit more deeply below the surface to see what's going on in the body. But I like to start with basic blood labs because those are usually things that are pretty accessible for most people. They're pretty cost efficient too, and they're a way for us to get some really good information that helps us know where to start when we want to start healing. So I'm going to turn my screen off in a minute and I'll have some slides for you to watch. And if you're watching along with us, well, that just helps me to focus in a little bit more. And if you have questions, you can always leave them in the comments section or you can email me, and I'll have some follow up resources for you at the end. But let's get started. I'll grab something warm and get cozy, or just take a deep breath and we'll start.
So, some of these labs you've probably had before, but maybe they were done at random without fasting, or you don't remember if you fasted, or without anyone explaining what they meant. And maybe you never even got a copy of your labs, just a phone call assuring you that your labs were, quote, normal and there's nothing wrong, as I said. Or maybe you had them drawn in the hope that they would provide some clarity, but they just left you feeling more defeated and wondering if it was in your head. And I do want you to feel more confident looking at your lab results. Not as verdicts, but as clues. And I want to say this, please hear me. You are not crazy for wanting answers. Have you ever seen the movie National Treasure? It's the one where Nicolas Cage plays Benjamin Franklin Gates, who's a historian and a treasure hunter. My family loves this film. There's a memorable scene where Gates discovers this pair of antique glasses with multiple color lenses, red and blue and green and clear. And at first they seem ordinary, but when he looks through them at the back of the Declaration of Independence and he adjusts the lenses, there are these hidden clues that suddenly appear and they guide him closer to the treasure. And as I thought about that scene, I thought that's the perfect metaphor for what we're doing here with our labs. So if I could hand you a pair of antique glasses, I would. But I think I've got something even better. Because your labs may seem normal at first glance, and they're not necessarily flagging high or low on whatever like lab company had them done, and they're not bolded or anything like that. But with the right lenses, and we factor in your symptoms and your story and your whole self, we can start to uncover what's really going on, and we'll adjust the lenses together. And slowly, those clues will start to appear. So, as I've said, if you have any recent labs, go ahead and grab them. We're going to do something a little bit different here. You can pull them up on your phone or your computer, and I do hope that you have access to those because one of the things I do recommend for all of my clients who are working with me is that you have a copy of your medical data. It doesn't even just need to live in your provider's portal. If you can print that out or store that on your computer, that way you can access that regardless if something happens with the doctor's provider technology or anything like that. Sometimes people like to actually hold it in their hands, but that way you can start to become your own health historian, and we can start to track trends over time, which is another thing we'll talk about at some point. So, we're not going to go into exact numbers today or even medical interpretation. Instead, I just want to give you a sense of what your body might be trying to tell you through these labs, even if someone else told you that they were normal. So, let's start with blood sugar insights because that grouping of labs is very important. And I think it's one of the things that we don't tend to recognize until much later on in our body of what's going on. And so these insights are like your body's financial report. I like to compare it to that for us to kind of understand what's going on. And the first marker is your hemoglobin A1C. And sometimes that's abbreviated HGA1C, as in cat. And that is like your 3-month spending statement. It tells us how well your blood sugar has been managed over a period of time. What this is it's an average. It doesn't tell us how high or how low your blood sugar has gone. So I will just say a lot of times that our blood sugar can go very high, peak, and it can drop very low like a roller coaster. And that hemoglobin A1C is just one marker of the picture of our blood sugar and how our body is managing blood sugar. Another marker I like to get is a fasting insulin level. That's not one that's often drawn, but it's one that tells us how much effort your body is putting in behind the scenes to keep things balanced, if we keep with that financial analogy. Um, Sometimes that will become elevated before anything else starts to show up in your body. Your body's kind of working overtime to keep things balanced. And when that insulin is elevated, it's like a hidden overdraft. It's working so hard to keep things normal, but there's a cost to it. And so, if you're struggling with energy crashes or weight resistance or mood swings, this is often where we start to see a pattern in there. One of the other labs that we'll talk about in a minute is going to include your glucose levels. And that glucose is just a measure of how much blood sugar is in your blood right at the moment. And so that can vary if you have not been fasting and for at least 8 hours, sometimes I say 12 hours, then you are going to get a different picture because it's going to be more in response to what you've just eaten. But if you know that you have been fasting for your labs and you see that lab level, it can be more reflective of how your blood sugar level is doing. And there's many different reasons. If you're fasting and that blood sugar is high, there's a lot that goes into that too. But these three right here, the fasting insulin and the hemoglobin A1C and your fasting glucose, that is a basic start to a picture of how your blood sugar is doing and your body's response to blood sugar. And there's some deeper labs I start to do that give us a little bit more information, a little bit more sensitive to that. But this is a really great place to start. And especially in perimenopause, menopause, when our body starts to be more resistant to the effects of insulin, which is that hormone in our body that helps bring down our blood sugar, regulate our blood sugar, our estrogen's dropping, and there's a lot of things that go on with that. So, this is a really great place to start and very easy to get some of that data. The next panel I'd like to look at has to do with iron. And this is a full iron panel plus ferritin, which is not necessarily a lab you may have had drawn before. And I'll explain about what that is. But iron isn't just about anemia. And you may have heard more about anemia with your children or maybe even in pregnancy if your iron levels got very low. But iron is about how well your body carries oxygen, manages energy, and even supports your immune health. But here's the thing, we need more than just one iron marker to understand the full picture of what's going on. So that's why I look at a full iron panel, including the ferritin, serum iron, which is that iron that's not stored, the TIBC, which is the total iron binding capacity, and iron saturation. So each one of those is telling part of the story. And I'll explain those, what they are. The ferritin shows your iron storage. Serum iron shows you what's circulating right now. The TIBC tells us how hungry your body is for iron. And then that iron saturation, which is like a percentage usually, shows you how full your iron bucket actually is. So, iron can be really complicated to understand, and sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my mind around it too. But I like to think about iron like the ingredients in our pantry. So ferritin, that's your stored supply of iron. It's like the jar of dried beans in the back of your cupboard. You know, the one that gets buried back there, and you have it since 2020, just in case you needed some extra food. So your basic iron might look fine on your labs, but if your ferritin is low, it could be that your body is running low on reserves of iron. And that can lead to fatigue, cold hands and feet, thinning hair, feeling like your brain is foggy. And low ferritin also affects your thyroid hormone production. So this one really matters, especially if you've been told that your iron looks okay, but you still feel worn out. That's a place we might want to investigate a little bit more. Serum iron, that's what's already on the stove. It's ready to be used today. The total iron binding capacity, or the TIBC, is your grocery list. It's talking about how much more your body wants or needs of iron. And that iron saturation is the measure of how full your pot is, what's actually usable right now. I might have oversimplified things a little bit, but I just want us to get a bit more of an idea of what some of these markers might mean on your test. So if your shelves are bare, like you have low ferritin, or your pot's not full, you have low saturation. Even if your serum iron looks okay for the moment, you're not really nourished long term. So there's another marker called hemoglobin, and that's what we're going to get in a complete blood count, or the CBC. Sometimes that's the only thing that practitioners are looking at, but that's why I don't just glance at your hemoglobin and say, that looks fine. But I want to know, do you have enough to carry your energy day to day? Enough to support your hormones, your mood, and your immune system? Because low iron doesn't always mean that you have pale skin and ice cravings, like you might have heard before with pregnancy. Sometimes it just means a soul deep fatigue that you've just learned to live with. And you don't have to. That might be one of the reasons that you're very, very tired. There are also some other patterns we pick up on an iron panels, like signs of hidden inflammation or how your body's managing stress. I'm not going to go into all of that here, but it's important to know these markers don't speak in isolation, and we don't just interpret labs as standalone numbers, but we're looking at them in relationship to one another. And we're not just chasing a range, we're looking for a pattern. And when we learn to listen with wisdom to what's going on, our body begins to speak more clearly. So I just want you to know, when I'm looking at your labs, I'm listening for those subtle cues too, to help us know how to tend to your body with care. And iron might be one of those things that we're needing to increase in some way, either supplementation or food, or figure out, why are we low on iron? Like, why is our body not absorbing something? Or is there some hidden blood loss somewhere, or that kind of thing? So it's just a clue to start looking a little bit more deeply. The next panel I'd like to look at is our thyroid panel plus antibodies. So a lot of times women will go to the doctor and they'll tell me Yeah, I had my doctor check my thyroid hormones. I mean, I was coming in, I had a lot of weight gain, and I thought, and I was exhausted, and I thought, it's probably, I wonder if it's my thyroid. And they feel really defeated because they say, well, my doctor checked my thyroid and it was okay. But when I look at their labs, they've only had maybe one or two markers checked. And overall, I want you to know your thyroid is like your body's thermostat. It helps you regulate your temperature, metabolism, mood, energy, even your cycles, your hormonal cycles, and your sleep. But when we only have that one marker checked, which is usually the TSH, that's kind of like asking the thermostat how it feels without checking whether the house is actually warm or cold. That TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So that number may not necessarily be off. It's actually more of a measure of our pituitary gland function than it is the thyroid. So to really go and understand what's happening, I like to look at some other markers of our thyroid function to tell us the actual thyroid hormones our body are using. And that is the free T3 and the free T4. Um, the active form of thyroid in your body is T3 and free T4. Your body has to convert into T3, and there's a lot of nutritional processes that go into that too. And we won't get into that today. Um, but there's a whole process in there that's so intricate. And there's also two additional markers that I like to look at, and those are antibodies to our thyroid. And they tell us whether your immune system is quietly targeting your thyroid. Those are the TPO and the TG antibodies. So, if you want to think about antibodies like overprotective guards, if your body's been under stress or it feels unsafe, sometimes your immune system can get confused and it starts targeting your thyroid by mistake. And you may not feel it as pain, but it can show up as fatigue and cold hands and feet, and puffiness or mood shifts or menstrual changes. And even if your TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone, looks normal, these markers can reveal your thyroid is quietly struggling beneath the surface. And if we can, when we can catch those patterns early, we can begin to support your thyroid gently before it turns into a full-blown immune struggle. So it's not very usual that we have those antibodies to our thyroid checked. And a lot of times, practitioners who don't practice the way I do will think, well, there's not necessarily a reason to check that, or it's not really, we're not going to really do anything about it. And from their standpoint, they're right because there's not a medication they can give if your thyroid's not already malfunctioning. But when we can catch things a little bit early, there are absolutely things that we can do from a functional standpoint to support the body's function and capacity to heal. I've even personally reversed the antibodies in my body, the thyroid antibodies that were starting to climb. And I pay attention to those because I have a family history of Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. It's already affecting my generation of women, and I have generations above me who've had that, two generations. And so I'm very careful to watch my thyroid antibodies. And I absolutely want to know at the first sign that they start creeping up. So that's why I monitor that yearly to make sure that I am taking the necessary precautions and lifestyle steps that I can do to support my thyroid now. One of the other things that I want to have checked yearly, at least yearly, and sometimes twice a year is actually optimal, is our vitamin D. And when we look at that in written form, that's vitamin D, and then it has the number 25 OH. Or if it's spelled out, it's vitamin D 25 hydroxy. Um, and I'll make sure that we have written on that Lab Insights guide. It's not a 1 comma 25, it's just a vitamin D 25. The 125, just getting a little bit more detailed, but that's more of a function of your kidney. And sometimes providers will order that by mistake. But we want the D25 hydroxy. And that's like your body's solar panel, vitamin D. It helps convert the light that you take in through sunshine, food, supplements. It converts it into energy your body can actually use. And sometimes we think about vitamin D as supporting our bones, but and even our immune system. It's come more into the limelight during the pandemic timeframe. But vitamin D plays a quiet but a powerful role in mood, hormone balance, immune strength, how well you bounce back from stress or illness. But here's the tricky part: low levels of vitamin D don't always scream at us, they can just whisper. You might feel a little more off or a little bit more tired than usual, more prone to getting sick or feeling down. And most women have no idea how low their levels actually are until they see it on paper. And that's one of the first markers I check. It also can be connected to the tight junctions in our gastrointestinal tract, which are help prevent leaky gut. So that's another thing I like to look into. So with women with autoimmune conditions, I have a specific range of vitamin D that I like to see to make sure their immune system has the right kind of support. I don't want it to just say, "Oh, it's normal." I want it to be optimal for immune health. And here's something that's also very important. When I see low vitamin D levels on a lab, I don't just reach for a high dose vitamin D supplement and send someone on their way. In my practice, I know that there's more to the story. Sometimes our body isn't absorbing the vitamin D well. Sometimes other nutrients need to be in place first or taken alongside vitamin D to help it work the way it should. And then too much vitamin D, especially over time, can create problems of its own. And I worked with women who were put on high doses of vitamin D without deeper support. And instead of feeling better, they developed a new swirl of symptoms. And in some cases, it even led to confusion in a diagnosis, and they were given medications their body didn't truly need. So I just say that because I come back to this. We don't chase quick fixes. We listen to your body's story and we move forward with discernment. And that's why I never treat numbers in isolation. We're going to look at the whole picture: your symptoms, your story, and how each lab speaks to the others. And later on, I'll show you where we can explore that a little bit more deeply. Another mark I like to look at is the high sensitivity C reactive protein. And that's often abbreviated with a lowercase hs and an uppercase CRP. You can think of this as like your body's smoke detector. It doesn't tell us where the fire is, but it alerts us that something is inflamed. So something is going on in the body. We don't exactly know where it is. But even subtle hidden inflammation can make it harder to lose weight, regulate our hormones, or even feel emotionally balanced. So if this number is not in the optimal range, not just the okay range, we want to pay attention. Where's that inflammation going on? Because we know that inflammation doesn't just stay a little fire. It's going to grow and it's going to spread and will be destructive. So we also know that there are a lot of things that we can do from a very early standpoint to tame that inflammation, to calm down that fire, and to help our body to stay strong and healthy. The next panel I'll look at is one you probably would have included in your labs, and that is the Comprehensive Metabolic Panel, and that's abbreviated CMP. So, this is like your dashboard, your metabolic dashboard. It gives us clues about your kidneys and your liver and your electrolytes and how those are all functioning. It's often in just a default lab, but it's rarely ever explained to us. So, we know that if your liver is under strain or your glucose is creeping up, that's where we see that glucose marker come in. The CMP may show us that. I mean, it's not a diagnosis, but it's definitely a signal worth understanding. So I look into that pretty deeply to see what's going on with our metabolism and what clues can we get to help us move forward as we tend to our body with wisdom. I also want to mention that on the CMP that there are some minerals on this panel like calcium, magnesium, and potassium, and that can be confusing because the levels in the bloodstream that we get when we have this test are very tightly regulated by our body because they're essential for things like heart rhythm and nerve signaling and muscle function. And so, even if the numbers look normal on the labs here, it doesn't necessarily mean that your body has enough in storage. So, I want you to think of it like this: just because there's milk in the pitcher doesn't mean that your refrigerator is stocked. And your body may be pulling from some deeper reserves to keep things looking stable in the moment while still quietly running low underneath. Magnesium is a really good example of that one because our magnesium in our bloodstream and the complete metabolic panel may look just fine, but we very well may be low in magnesium. So I actually look at magnesium in a different way if I'm trying to say what's going on in storage. And that's why we interpret the values in the context of your symptoms, your story, and sometimes other forms of testing. Because true nourishment in our body isn't just about what's circulating in the blood in some of these tests, it's about what your body can actually count on. And these labs aren't going to give us a diagnosis, but they can give us a signal. They can give us a pattern worth paying attention to. And sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's the first gentle nudge that your body is asking for support. So that's why I look at labs not as a checklist, but as part of the conversation your body's having with you. And when we listen well, we can respond with clarity and not with guesswork. So even though this panel might look like it's routine or you get just brushed off as it's fine, there's often more to see if you know how to read between the lines. The last lab panel that I'm looking at is the CBC, or the complete blood count. And I think about this as a look at your body's delivery system and your inner defenders. And so the CBC gives us a snapshot of your blood, your red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. It's one of the most common labs drawn, but it's rarely explained in a way that feels helpful. So here's how I think of it. It's like checking the mail carriers, the security guards, and the repair crew in your body. The red blood cells, RBCs, carry oxygen. You can think of them as your delivery drivers. No, UPS or FedEx. And when they're low, it can feel like you're running uphill all the time. Weak, maybe even short of breath. Your white blood cells, WBCs, are your immune system's first responders. So, if we have high or low counts of these, they can give us clues about how our body's responding to stress, infection, or inflammation. There are some really good hidden markers in here. Platelets help your blood clot when it's needed, but too many or too few can be signals that are worth exploring. Now, we don't look at these numbers in isolation here. Sometimes patterns here are whispering about hidden inflammation, chronic stress, or even nutrient deficiencies, especially combined with what we see like in your iron or your vitamin D markers or some of your other nutrition markers. And this test isn't just about catching illness. It's a way for us to gently ask your body, how are you holding up? And just like every lab review, we're not looking for perfection here, but we're just looking for patterns of possibility, maybe places where your body is asking for care. You may wonder if something's missing here that I mentioned, and that's cholesterol. So let's talk for a minute about cholesterol because this one can really cause panic in women. A basic cholesterol panel includes the total cholesterol, HDL, LDL cholesterol, and triglycerides. And a lot of providers run it, but they don't often explain it. And I often get asked about this one, especially since many physicians still use a basic cholesterol or a lipid panel as a primary marker for the heart health. And while it can provide some helpful information, I haven't included this in my top 7 foundational labs because it's just one piece of a much bigger picture. But this is what I want you to know. Cholesterol is not your enemy. It is essential for hormone production. It's that backbone of our hormone foundation. I'm trying to think of the word I'm trying to say here. So it's just essential for hormone production and brain function. But patterns can tell us something. It's not about the number of the cholesterol, it's about the story. And this cholesterol panel isn't the whole picture, but it is a useful puzzle piece. So if cholesterol is something you're concerned about, we can absolutely explore that further. But I have found that looking at inflammation and blood sugar and thyroid function often gives us even earlier and more actionable clues for long term heart health. Um, and before you just go get put on a statin, which causes a whole host of other problems, it's worth looking at some of those other markers. And I just want to say that conversation about labs is not abstract for me. Years ago, before I started specializing in integrative and functional nutrition, I was in the thick of it. I had brain fog I couldn't shake, exhaustion despite plenty of sleep, and energy crashes that left me shaky and irritable and barely functioning. My weight wouldn't budge no matter what I did. And I started looking for answers. And I finally had these labs drawn in 2017. And I was shocked to see that I was in the pre diabetic range. Hashimoto's thyroiditis was brewing, early signs of heart issues were showing up, and several other markers were way off. And what hit me the most was that these things didn't happen overnight. Hashimoto's, heart disease, diabetes, all of these run really strong in my family, as I've already mentioned. And they don't just appear one morning, they build over time, slowly, sometimes quietly, but no one had helped me see the signs. No one had given me the tools or the language to catch things early. Even though I was a clinical dietitian, trained at one of the top medical centers in the nation, and I have spoken with so many women who share this story, a diagnosis that seemed like it came out of nowhere, except it didn't. The clues were there, they just hadn't been taught how to read them. In our current medical model, we wait. We're not taught prevention. We're not guided toward optimization. We're told it's probably nothing, or let's just keep an eye on it, or there's not much to do unless it gets worse. Or we're told food doesn't matter, or that lifestyle doesn't help. But here is the truth. Food, nutrition, and lifestyle absolutely matter. And there's so much we can do if we're empowered with the right information and support. We do not have to wait for a diagnosis to begin healing or to reach a crisis stage before you start listening to our bodies. And if you haven't heard me say this already today, normal on a lab result does not mean optimal. A result can fall within that normal range, but still be far from where your body functions best. Now, if you're thinking, I've had labs, but I don't remember if I was fasting, I don't have a copy, you're not alone. That's exactly why I created this. I wanted to help you become your own best health historian and start tracking what matters. As I've already mentioned, start keeping a health history, including your labs, and not just what your doctor sees. You need to have your own copies. Track them and write down how you were feeling when you had those labs drawn, because you are your own best health historian. You know your body well. And when you track your labs over time, you start to notice trends and patterns. And I just want you to know this is not to blame anyone in our medical system. This is to empower you. And far too often, I get a client's labs and it's barely anything. It's just the minimum that insurance covers. But if you're the woman who's done guessing and you're ready to listen to your body with wisdom and clarity, and if you want help obtaining the most informative labs and making sense of them, I have a simple option as a next step for you. I've created the Ingrained Foundational Insights panel, and this includes all 7 of these labs that I've mentioned in one place, plus a few extras I often use with clients to help us get a clearer picture of what's going on. And these additional labs help us get some real clues finally, just using basic blood work about what might be going on underneath the surface of what you're struggling with, whether it's low energy, brain fog, stubborn weight that won't budge, hormonal swings. You don't have to wait on a doctor to sign off. You don't have to debate insurance codes. You can just request these directly, go to a local lab to have them drawn, and then once your results are in, we'll walk through them together. You'll also have access to my Ingrained Foundational Insights guide, which will help you review your results with fresh eyes. Or you can take it a step further and you can schedule a welcome hour with me where we'll walk through everything together. So I want you to imagine, what could it feel like even a week from now, to finally have some clarity. Let's take a calm, clear look at what your body has been carrying. You can request your foundational insight panel through the link in the show notes, wherever you're listening. And when I work with women, 101 or in a group, this is where we begin to go deeper. We don't stop at normal, we listen for what's optimal. And from that listening, we create a personalized path forward. Simple nutrition and lifestyle shifts, therapeutic foods, supportive routines, high quality nutrition supplements. But all of these are grounded in what your body is truly asking for. Sometimes your labs will point us toward deeper testing if needed, because the goal isn't just information, it's transformation. Your symptoms are not random, they're clues. Your labs, they're your body speaking. Let's keep listening together.
I'm so glad you were with me today. Listening to our body through labs is often one of the first steps toward caring for ourselves and tending our body with curiosity. And I want you to hear this, that you are worthy of tender care. So, if you're ready to take some next steps toward insight for your body and what your labs might be telling you, you can download the Foundational Wellness Labs checklist that I have in the show notes. And if you're ready to get some data, you can go ahead and request your Ingrained Foundational Insights panel. That's a really quick process. You should get your results back very quickly, and then we can schedule a welcome hour to walk through those together and to listen together to what your body is trying to tell you and start mapping out some next steps for you to start feeling more like yourself, more energized, more stable, more balanced, and continue your healing pathway. Thank you for being with me today and for trusting me with your time. Grace and peace.